Samuel silently watched as Derek tore up his drawings and stomped on the image of his father. He clenched his fists, but did nothing. But the next day he arrived at the school. "Are you Derek?" asked the man in the leather jacket. When he took off his glasses and said his name, the bullies' faces turned pale. What happened next, they would remember for the rest of their lives. Samuel Reeves had never been one to stand out. In class, he sat in the back row, never argued, never got into fights, and never told loud stories among his classmates. He was a shadow, a figure in the background, someone people only remembered when they needed someone to laugh at. At school, he was seen as a quiet kid. No one knew what was going on in his head, and few ever tried to find out. Sam didn't seek company because he had long realized that the people around him didn't share his interests. He wasn't interested in endless conversations about sports, fashion, or parties. He loved something else: stories. They lived in his mind, spilling onto the pages of his notebook as drawings. In those pencil lines and shadows, he found a world that felt safer than the noisy, cruel school hallways. But silence and solitude never meant safety. To people like Derek Malone and his friends, Sam was the perfect target. They despised the weak. Despising was easy. The weak didn't fight back. He heard them before he saw them. "Hey, artist!" That voice was too familiar. It carried a mocking tone that promised trouble. Samuel kept walking, trying not to turn around. "What are you drawing? Maybe show us?" Kevin chimed in, always eager to echo Derek. The footsteps behind him quickened. Samuel tightened his grip on his backpack straps, but that was enough to provoke them. A yank. A shove. His backpack slipped from his shoulder and hit the floor. His notebook landed nearby, flipping open in the middle. "Oh, look! The little artist thinks he's someone special." Derek smirked, picking up the notebook. He flipped through the pages while his friends laughed. "Wow, he's got a whole collection." "Oh, and who's this?" Kevin suddenly ripped out a page. "Whoa, looks like some kind of soldier. Is this your dad or something?" Kevin tossed the drawing to the ground and stomped on it. Something tightened inside Sam. His father. The only thing that truly mattered to him. His vision darkened. "Take it back if it's so important," Derek sneered, shoving Sam hard against the wall. Laughter. Loud, piercing. Samuel stood by the dumpster, gripping the lid so tightly his fingers turned white. The sour smell of spoiled milk and damp paper filled the air. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying not to feel the humiliation rising in his throat, squeezing it tight. His gaze fell on his notebook, crumpled, stained, lying among the trash like worthless junk. Carefully, he picked it up, dusting it off, but the pages were still ruined. The torn drawing stuck out with jagged edges, like an open wound. His hands trembled. Something new boiled inside him, something warm and dangerous. Anger. Not the kind of anger that flared up when something went wrong, but a deep, resonant, smoldering rage. It had been hiding in him for a long time, but now it was starting to surface. The house was quiet. Sam sat in his room, staring at the ruined pages, when he heard footsteps. Heavy. Steady. His father. John Reeves was rarely home. Sam couldn't remember the last time they had a real conversation. Work had always been more important. The door cracked open. "Why do you look so upset?" his father asked, sitting down across from him. Sam looked away. "Just tired," he muttered. His father studied him in silence, then glanced at the notebook. "I see you've been drawing again." He reached out his hand, and Sam, without resistance, handed him the damaged notebook. John flipped through the pages, reading them like a book. Page after page. Then he stopped. On that drawing, the torn one. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Who did this?" There was no anger in his voice, just cold, firm determination. Sam froze. He could have lied, said he tripped, said he tore it by accident. But lying to John was pointless. A guy from school. His father nodded, slowly, without emotion. Then he closed the notebook. I'll drive you to school tomorrow. Sam looked up at him. Why? But John was already standing up, leaving the room. Sam didn't think much of his words. But the next morning, when he stepped outside, his father was already waiting by the car. They drove in silence. When the car finally stopped in front of the school, John spoke at last. Show me those boys. And suddenly, Sam understood. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the moment everything changed. Derek and his friends sat on the concrete steps at the school entrance, lazily chatting about their latest prank. It was an ordinary morning. The sun was glaring. The air was crisp. Nothing hinted at trouble. But then, footsteps. Heavy, slow, carrying a silent threat. They saw the man approaching. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black leather jacket. His stride was measured, yet there was something in the way he moved. Absolute confidence in every step. He moved like a predator that had already chosen its prey. He stopped right in front of them. Are you Derek? His voice was calm, emotionless. The boys exchanged glances. Derek squinted, trying to figure out who this man was. Who's asking? The man slowly removed his sunglasses. John Reeves. Silence. The air felt heavier. Derek's throat went dry. His eyes widened. Kevin swallowed hard. The others tensed. You're that John Reeves? Derek's voice no longer held the same confidence it had just moments ago. A legend. A name that spoke for itself. People told stories about him. An operative who carried out missions that never made the news. A specialist who knew 100 ways to make a man regret his actions. Some thought he was a myth, but he was real, and he was standing right in front of them, and his stare promised nothing good. We were just joking, Derek stammered, instinctively stepping back. John didn't blink. You think humiliating people is a joke? Derek said nothing. I asked you a question. His voice wavered. You will not go near my son again, understood? Derek nodded, quickly, too quickly, as if hoping it would save him from something worse. But John didn't look away. I said, understood? Yes, sir, Kevin blurted out. A pause. John leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. If I hear your name again in the wrong context, trust me, you don't want to find out what happens next. His words cut like a blade. He gave them one last look, then turned and walked away, unhurried. The boys were silent. Kevin looked at Derek. Dude, we are so... Derek swallowed. He didn't respond. He already knew. From that day on, no one touched Sam. The school hallways, which once felt like narrow tunnels leading into traps, suddenly seemed wider. He no longer felt the weight of mocking stares. No more whispers behind his back. No more tension in the air when he passed Derek's group. Now, they didn't even look his way. And if their eyes did meet by accident, they looked away. Derek no longer smirked, no longer made snide remarks, no longer threw insults at his back. Kevin, too, seemed to have lost his voice. And the others, the ones who used to laugh along, now pretended they didn't even know him. But some even tried to talk to him. Hey Sam, cool drawings by the way, one of the guys casually said, someone Sam would have never called a friend. Have you been drawing for a long time? A classmate asked hesitantly, a girl he had never spoken to before. He nodded, gave short answers, but inside the feeling was strange. They hadn't changed. They weren't different people. They had just realized Sam wasn't as defenseless as they had thought. But that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was, he felt strength. Not because his father had scared someone, not because fear had made Derek and his friends disappear from his life, but because he understood. He wasn't alone. That thought was warm. That thought changed him. It didn't matter how often his father was away. It didn't matter how rarely they talked. What mattered was that when Sam needed him, he was there. And that knowledge gave him confidence. Now, when he opened his notebook, his hands no longer trembled.